Good evening, good day, good afternoon, good morning, whenever that may be. Welcome to the second time of doing episode number 169. Let me get moved over here. Had a microphone crap out, and I recorded the whole thing last night, with no sound. But thanks to my buddy Jim Wampler, who brought me this incredibly retro-looking microphone that looks like it came off the desk of Chet Huntley or David Brinkley, I'm back in business. So here we go. I hate redoing these because I don't feel I do them as well the second time. I rushed through them. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, we'll start off. Love the house rules idea of negative hit points before death. We always did extra dice for stats and threw out the lowest. Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't matter what mechanics you use to do this, as long as the party all agree, the group, the game in this case, the game group, your group, gamer group, if they all agree and everybody starts using the same mechanics, it's all good. If you're having fun, it's good. And then someone congratulating. Yes, we did get together Wednesday last. Only 4 of the 6 of us, alas. But we did have a great time. We spaced out around my big pool table. And all but one of us was wearing a mask. His wife is extremely immunocompromised, so we understood that. The rest of us didn't. Had a great time. Next one is our home group's going to get back together again as well. Many of them never played D&D, and even a few who have never played it old school way. I'm thinking of running a simple dungeon crawl and seeing where it goes. Do you have any advice on what to emphasize or plan around to make it memorable and hopefully leave them wanting more? And he also had a college professor who told him that segue wasn't a word because he thought it was spelled the way of the little two-wheel cart thing. Anyway, how embarrassing, he said. Advice. Yes, I do have some advice. Something simple. Simple hook. Reasonably simple obstacles and puzzles and encounters. There's bunches of websites that you can go and download free dungeon levels. Pardon me. Do it. Especially if you're going to bring your group back to life, as well as try and install some new members. Do it. Just flip through the drawings until you see one that strikes you. Oh, cool. And make up a story to go around it. Use 2 of them, connect them, whatever. Especially for the new people that haven't played it old style, emphasize the theater of the mind. The fact that you don't have, and don't get me wrong, I love Dwarven Forge's stuff. I mean, wow. Given another date, another time, that may have been the way I started. I didn't. And now, being an old dyed-in-the-wool curmudgeon, I don't change. But play the theater of the mind as much as you can. Make them imagine. Make them think. Inside, behind the eyelids. You probably, if they're friends, have a good idea who's likely to get into playing the role as opposed to who's likely to be attracted to the mechanics and rolling dice. And all right, I mean, there's all kinds of players. Watch for that and go accordingly. Particularly with the new people, make a point of once or twice at least, what do you think? What are you going to do? Point out to them. Get them involved. draw them in, and hey, have a good time. Start them out, give everybody pre-gens, and just start bashing that way, and then second time around you can all roll up your characters, and you don't have to start on level 1. It's all about the struggle to get better, whether you're getting better from 1 or getting better from 3 or 4 or even 5. You have a much better chance of doing that than you do from 1. It doesn't matter where you start. Start's just a starting point. All right. On the subject of making monster saddles, are they crafted by leathersmiths or magic? How about a monster rancher class? Well, no, I don't like the proliferation of classes. Okay, saddles. It's an interesting question. You've tamed a hippogriff, or you have a hippogriff where it won't eat you immediately upon seeing you, whatever, or whatever beast you want. I'd say you're going to need both. You're going to need a very skilled leathersmith, because they're going to draw up plans and make a one-off for you to your dimensions, your specifications, your sketches. So you're going to need a super skilled leather craftsman who's going to use nothing but the finest leather. And then I would see that it wouldn't hurt to go find a friendly wizard to see what he can do about casting a spell of some sort that gives the saddle an affinity for staying, holds the person in it on better. You can do stuff like that, but you're going to have a lot of harnesses and stuff. Anything that flies, you have to be prepared for it to turn upside down. And if you aren't strapped in or harnessed in, it's going to be splat on the ground. And unlike Wile E. Coyote, you will not get up from the little poof cloud of smoke and dust at the bottom of the cliff. Both. How do I run sieges? Do I focus only on the characters fighting a small part, or do you roll the dice to see how the battle at large is going? Okay. How did the siege come about? Is this merely background to what's going on in the campaign right now, and the player characters are only peripherally involved? Or have they volunteered as a group of mercenaries to get involved in this thing? That's the first thing you have to figure out, is what's the grand strategic level doing, and how does that affect the player characters? If they have volunteered as a band of mercenaries to do great and glorious deeds, then you can give them low odds weekly chances of catching some kind of crud. You can devise a mission for them to get into the gatehouse and whatever. You can devise a mission, and then you could play that out as simply as an adventure. It could be that, again, it depends upon the level of commitment and involvement and enlistment that the PCs have in what's going on. There's been many an interesting short story written over the years, where your group kind of drops in on this ongoing, never-ending siege thing, and you do some things, and you're allowed to sky away. That all comes into the mix of, I believe, of how to answer your question. I wouldn't just say, oh gee, your guy died last night in a fighting off a sortie from the walls. Now, when we played Fight in the Skies at Lake Geneva, we did exactly that. We all had a stable of different pilots, and my car would, each of the squadron leaders would write out what they were going to do, or he would, as referee umpire, he would generate orders for each squadron, what they were doing on their section of the front that week, and then from that see what possibilities arose for a German mission that would cross with an Allied mission, and from that he would devise, okay, we have an encounter, we go over to Mike's house, and those, some of us would be flying our British pilots, other of us would be flying our German pilots. We switch back and forth. One night, one sortie, I might be flying German, and on the next, after that one's over, we got time to play another one, I might be flying British. It gave us a variety. And I might not be flying at all, and one of my characters gets killed in one of the abstract things that he did, abstracting and resolving encounters. My very best pilot at the time got killed on something I had nothing to do with. It just came up. If your DM's doing something like that, well, you only got one PC probably you're playing. I never got into, and I still don't see the need to get into something that grand and sweeping, except as a distinctly murmured background to the campaign. But that's just me. One of my thoughts on using dinosaur encounters in a medieval fantasy setting. Well, that 7-letter word there, second to the end, fantasy, covers a lot of ground, doesn't it? You don't have to tell them that if they're running around in what your version of 14th century Europe is, or whatever. You don't have to tell them, oh, you just encountered a T-Rex. You can tell them you encountered a really big lizard running around on 2 legs with a whopping big head as big as the body of a horse with teeth as long as a forearm, and okay, they're going to get the idea that it's a T-Rex or an Allosaurus, or however you decide it. It's got a big mace for a tail. Okay, why not? It's fantasy. Is it any sillier than saying that they just ran into 3 magical goats that can walk 3 feet off the ground? I can probably come up with a neat encounter with either, using either of those. But why not? Go for it. Use stuff out of place, out of time. Why not? It's fantasy. Don't tell anybody it's fantasy. And then we had a comment on, a further up comment about dragons and their lairs and their toilet habits. And this individual said it just didn't make sense to him that a lone dragon like Smog would sit on this enormous pile of loot for centuries and do nothing about it. Okay, key phrase there, it didn't make sense to him. Because who's to say that Smog hadn't been ensorcelled and ensorcelled to sleep for 700 years, unless disturbed? Being a reptile, who says that they don't estivate? That they, only need to eat a couple of war horses in a night or two, and then they can slumber in a semi-conscious state for years or decades. Lots of fantasy tales make mention of the dragons had been quiet, but now they're awake again. Why they weren't awake, what woke them up, anybody is free to question, oh, that sounds silly. But I can think of a dozen reasons why that could be perfectly plausible. And it makes for much better storytelling. when was it Beowulf went out to kill the dragon and get the hoard from the river and all that. You know, there wasn't a ton of, maybe it was that Gilgamesh. No, that was Beowulf. There wasn't a ton of background story to tell us, you know, what had gone on before. Did Gary Gygax talk much about Don Kaye's involvement in the creation of D&D? No, I don't ever recall it, and I'd be willing to assert that Don had little or no input in the creation. I can't say that he didn't sit in on a session or two of playtesting, and might have made a comment that, you know, was woven into the tapestry at a later date. I can't say that didn't happen, but that wasn't Don's interest as far as I know. I never met the man, but as far as what Gary had related to me was he was a war gamer and wanted to invest, and so they formed a company called Tactical Studies Rules. Don died unexpectedly, and no slur or insinuation against Don's widow. She said, well, you know, he's not doing this anymore. I could certainly use the money. So Gary had to find a way to find the money, and I'm pretty sure that's how Brian Bloom got pulled in. Much to Gary's chagrin, too bad he didn't find a better human being when he found money. The buyout went smooth in that Mrs. K wasn't, you know, raising stink or threatening lawsuits or anything like that. It was just you know, hey, Gary, I really do need the money. And Gary hustled and scrabbled and found the Blooms. I'm sure throughout the history of TSR there were a multitude of product ideas that failed to launch. Is there a TSR product that you were very excited about that made it all the way through to production and distribution but was not a commercial success? Yes. William the Conqueror, 1066. That's the product. One of my thoughts as to what led to its failure. And the perceptive part of the question, what led to its failure to resonate with the customer base? The customer base saw us as only fantasy. They were not able to see us as capable of doing anything with a traditional war game, a historical game, anything like that. We were the dragon guys. The dragon guys. Boot Hill, or not Boot Hill. I'm trying to remember the name. We put out a game that was basically Custer getting slaughtered. It wasn't a bad game, but it didn't get any exposure. William the Conqueror was. Disclosure, yes, I did the development. Easiest development I think I could have ever have done. Needed very little. It came in pretty much a polished gem. It had a diceless combat system. The box game had 2 full battles and counters, you know, unique counters necessary. And in the magazine, we immediately published the 3rd, so you could fight all 3 battles that took place in England in the year 1066, and it just sat there. We were dragon people. There was a game that I didn't think was gonna, you know, I wasn't involved in selecting what got published and what didn't at this point in time. Very rarely at all. And once the supplements were done, my input into that, the production schedule pretty much ceased. And I had my own, but, excuse me, getting dry. We put out a game that was I guess, it was based on something called Ludus Latricularum, some Roman, you know, peas in the hole, or, I don't know, some sort of Roman placement thingy game, and, I think Gary and Brian wanted to look scholarly, and so they put out this historical game, and it pretty much stank. As far as, you know, sitting on the shelves like a day-old fish. I never did think Empire of the Paddle Throne was going to amount to much. Role-playing itself was way, way, way too new to expect enough people to get involved in learning whole new languages and absorbing an entire culture. It was like having to read The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit before you could start playing. I didn't think that was going to work, and sadly I was correct. And TSR took a beating on it. Now, what's your favorite part of Against the Giants? If only one of the three could make the cut, which would you save? Now, I have to hand it to the people that watch this. Some of them are quite bright fellows. I assume. I don't see any, obviously, female handles that get used. I'm assuming. Of course, I call everybody guys. So, anyway, gave a very, very good reply to this. And I, for the most part, I agree right down the line. G1 is more practical as a module, and it has more humorous undertones with all the lackeys running about. G2, if played correctly, should be nearly impossible for the players. If the party does not freeze to death, the environmental hazards will outright kill you, should the numerous ambushing monsters somehow fail. G3 is the ultimate hackfest. Tally up 430 plus possible monsters, 100 of which are fire giants. Never got around to counting the available treasure, but I'm pretty sure it's in the millions. And given the three, G1 is the most sane choice. There's enough loot in G1 to make any sensible PC immediately go into retirement, should they survive. And that's pretty much very precise and succinct analysis. Of course, also G1 has a sentimental value to me because it was our first commercial thing, and I've been doing the vetting on Judges Guild up to that point, but now this one was ours, so it has that. They are tough. Ooh, yes, they are tough. But keep in mind that these three were designed to be a rough and tumble tournament over 3 sessions. And keep in mind, I believe this was released for Metro Detroit. Wherever it was, we had over 400 people sign up. And if they didn't come as a group, they were just lumped together into, okay, you 7, your group, you 7, your group. So we had dozens of groups playing, and we had to winnow them out severely till I think we only had 6 or 8 groups on the 3rd day. So this particular module family was written from a slightly different perspective for a slightly different reason than subsequent ones were. Okay. Oh, and somebody informed me of where I could go find the thing about Gary's secret house rules. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to look them over and make some comment. And they also said that Luke Gygax's YouTube channel debunks some of them, and that may well be. I love the man to death, don't get me wrong, but Gary sometimes he sometimes spun the story one direction, and a couple years later he'd spin the story slightly different. I don't think he was doing it maliciously, and I'm not suggesting he was addled, but I think as his play progressed and maturity changed. And so, I can remember inconsistencies in things he told me when we were working on projects, and I think most of it was the fact that his mind was going 1,000 miles a minute and constantly updating itself. And another person on the G series, they liked G1 for the fact that it had the orc refugees in the basement, and that they should ally themselves with the party, and then everybody gets out. And I was delighted to have that in there because we were trying to get people away from the track they were falling down, which was if it's not one of us, kill it. And so, and also if you did ally yourself with these, you had a much better chance of surviving and making off with more loot. Everything isn't a simple, oh, go cut it. You know, go hit it with my axe and cut it open and see what's inside. Well, Gary himself admitted to many of those house rules in his later years on the Dragon's Foot forum. I know. And if you went way back at the front of the forum and way back at the back of the forum, he probably contradicted himself in there too. But I got 139 pages on the Dragon's Foot website, and I may have some contradictions in there too. Memory's a funny thing. Oh, all right. Last time I had music on in the background. I don't remember what it was exactly. I was asking, you know, and do I game to it? Not often, because too many people. I use music as a focus technique. It helps when I'm writing. It helps. I write better when I got music on in the background. Somehow it draws my focus to the writing better or whatever. I'm not sure how exactly that works, but I use it in that regard. There is an artist, and I don't even know if the man's still alive. He's a foreigner, named B.O. Hanson, Hanson. He has 3 magnificent instrumental albums out. Magician's Hat, Attic Thoughts, and what I think is the very first allowed soundtrack for The Lord of the Rings. And it's very evocative. It's beautiful. Now, what I would do with those 3 is I'd put them on my CD changer, hit it on shuffle, and just let it hop around in the background. There's some Celtic albums I have that I've done that with, but it's there. I find I focus on the table better by subconsciously acknowledging the music but separating it. It's hard to explain, but it works for me. But no, we don't usually. Now I'm when we're down here board gaming, I might have 5 CDs loaded in the changer playing around. But that's just very low background music. All right, here we go. We're going to get into shields. This was several. It was an original question about large tower shields and their armor class, and wouldn't they be better? And a response was to look at the DMG, page 64, and you'd see. And so the gist of it is that a big, large tower shield, if you know you're going up against carnivorous apes who like to chunk rocks at you, or a known distance weapon using foe, I would against missile weapons boost you. However, in a regular melee, those big tower shields are harder than hell to hold on. I would cut back on your decks. I might take back some of your to hits, simply because it's such a load. And no, you aren't trained to use it. All right, now, if you're part of a culture that used tower shields, and you started training at the age of 12, and you're now 20, okay, in this case, I'll let it not be a hindrance or an encumbrance to you. Keep in mind also that in the abstract system of that is combat in Dungeons and Dragons, the to hit is not only a function of whatever thing you're swinging. Small shields, bucklers, for instance, a trained buckler fighter, such as the Scots, around the time of Braveheart, for instance, you saw a lot of them with, it was called a targ, from which target came, but with a boss. And so that became a weapon in its own right. Hit laterally, hit full on. That metal boss would certainly mess your face up, cave it in. And, okay, it might make you a little more susceptible to ranged weapons, but once you're in a melee, it doesn't matter anyway. The weapon, the arrows, and unless you're long shanks and ordering to fire into the general melee, it becomes a moot point. Let's see, what else? Oh, how do I feel about exploding dice, as in Swords and Wizardry? And that's where if a dice lands on a certain number and whatever, then it continues. You roll more and you roll more, and it's like a critical hit with cascading damage. Tunnels and Troll had something about it. When you rolled doubles, you got to roll some more, and you added it on. I don't care. It's not the way I handle critical hits or critical fumbles. That's just not the way I do it. But if you want to do it, and you want to, roll in that 20 and end up doing 37 points of damage to whatever it was with a short sword because of wonderful die rolls, okay. That could simulate the fact that inexplicably your foe left himself wide open. Inexplicably, their foot slipped, whatever. I don't care. If that's what you want to, if that's what you want to do, why wouldn't you? Again, if the group at the table is happy operating under the laws of the table, gaming nirvana, gaming bliss, it gets no better. Let's see. Criticals. Nat 20s. I don't even really consider them criticals. Nat 20s. Now, whether it's a Nat 20 swinging an axe at a stone golem, or a Nat 20 trying to toss your grapnel up over the wall and find a you did it. You did it well. That's enough. In my world, that's enough. Now, here's an interesting comment, and it's about people such as myself going to conventions. And I can only speak for myself, but I do know that some of my other old grognard acquaintances who are on the tour, special guesting, operate under some of the same principles. Now, having said that, that's cool. Anybody could hire you for a huge convention. That's like hiring Gilbert Gottfried for voice acting. Man, I wish I could just drop eight grand on an afternoon of voice lines. Well, I guess he's talking about Gilbert. No, I'm not hired. And I don't get treated like an employee. I am invited each year to Total Confusion Game Convention out in Massachusetts, near Rhode Island. And they send me an airplane ticket. I get a hotel room, which I most years have shared with somebody else some other guest. Industry folk is what the general term is. And I can sign to my room for the buffets in the morning, and I can go eat in the volunteers room, because they bring a lot of really good homemade food in and feed the volunteers. They get to, what's one of the perks of volunteering is a really good chili, and I've had really good beans, and there's roast, beef and ham, and anyway, I run 4, 5, 6 games depending upon the length of the convention. That's what I do with TotalCon. Now, GaryCon or Gamehole Con, both in the state of Wisconsin, I drive. Because GaryCon is what it is, and because I am, I've tried to help the family with GaryCon as much as I could since it's been going, I drive there, and I don't ask to be compensated for the gas. They give me a room, and I generally look out for my own food, but I must add that they also rent a scooter for me, so I don't have to haul up and down the long halls getting back and forth to events. And TotalCon does the same thing. And Gamehole does that for me. Especially the first year and a half after my chemotherapy, I had a great deal of difficulty walking more than about 100 steps because my feet felt like they were being roasted with a flamethrower. Peripheral nerve damage. So those are perks. If I go to Dallas, he flies me down. I get a room. There's usually a couple of meals, dinner, banquet type thingies that we get to go to. And I get per diem. I get, a little bit of cash to feed myself with, buy a souvenir, buy a book, whatever. Which, I don't have to buy much. Gamehole does the same thing. They give me a per diem. When I went to AppleCon 2 years ago, we lost all of 20. That was a different thing altogether because my wife went with me. We were all the guests were staying, the industry people were staying in this cute little bed and breakfast. And the events were all held in the giant party barn at the bed and breakfast. And so, my wife and I picked up part of that cost because we wanted to make the trip. But if it weren't for the other circumstances, I couldn't afford to go to them all. So no, I don't get hired for it. But I do try to earn my dinner by running many games at GaryCon and at Gamehole. I run my dirt track Saturday night, which is a big map that I had spent a lot of money having made up, and it's run with Matchbox racers, Hot Wheels style racers, and I take all that stuff with me. So that's how and why I go to cons. So if you've got a con that's got some decent numbers, and you want to rent me, don't hire me, but you can rent me for the weekend, get in touch, and we'll see if it's driving distance. Part of the other thing with the driving is that when I drive to these two, I drive with Jim Wampler so that I have somebody to talk to, and I'm 72. I don't want to nod off on the highway. I used to drive with Rich Franks, the Axeman. I'd drive to Purdue, pick him up. We'd go up, game all weekend, drive down, let him drive coming down so I could catch a few Z's if I needed them, so that I was fresh for the remaining trip, the last leg of home. So that's also an issue, is that I don't do the driving on my own. I could probably do it, but who the hell wants to? All right. So no, you can't hire me for a convention. But you can invite me, and I might come. I've been to a lot of them that only been to one or two of, and then they didn't do well, or I didn't enjoy the experience. All right, here's an interesting one. How do you extract the players from the tavern? Whenever an adventure starts in a village or an inn, the players never seem to leave. Feels like we could just walk down to the corner bar, throw back a few, and have a more immersive version of the same experience, but with less prep work. On a similar note, how do you handle selecting equipment? I want to give the players choices, but it feels like the shopping trip always takes up the whole night. Okay. A suggestion that was given after this, many suggestions. It's a dry county. They got a tough city watch. Strangers aren't welcome to stay in the tavern all night. A surly barkeep that is looking for any excuse to throw you out. If it only happens at the beginning of a new cycle story, that's one thing. Now, if you're basing your adventures out of a town or a village or whatever, and every night they laugh it up and pretend to bend the elbow, yeah, that's wasted time. You're right. You could just go down to your local and have a few. On the equipment thing, that's absolutely should be homework. Have them put out a list, prepare a list of all the equipment that they want to purchase. And, they'll put fanciful stuff down there. Hopefully they'll put down the mundane that you have to have, like grappling hooks and, good rope and spikes and a hammer, and the standard dungeoneering kit. And when they begin to go beyond that, you can allow it, okay, set a price to it, make sure they can afford it. And the stuff that's a little extravagant, in your opinion, no. Nope, nobody around here's got one of those. So now that looks, next time they go to a new village or whatever, next time they run into a peddler, whatever, that's a new little subplot going on. Don't give them everything right off the bat. You don't let them start out the adventure going to the gnome artificer's workshop and buying the collapsible 10-foot pole that collapses down to 30 inches. I once put that in an old campaign, and it immediately became the most sought-after, valuable artifact in the whole game because of its. You could take it with you anywhere. Just stick it down the back of your shirt, and yet it was there, and you could do all the things that the archetypical 10-foot pole is known for doing. Let's see what else. All right. What character class do I feel is underrated, misunderstood, or played poorly by the players I encounter? This question is meant to be a constructive criticism from my professional viewpoint. My experience is that players get clerics wrong more often than not. Why? Why? They do not realize the power of information that the cleric can elicit from the games with divination-type spells. And he would argue that it's the most important class all by itself. For that reason, not even counting curative spells. And I'd have to pretty much agree. And I could give you a sterling example of an adventure that I wrote that has a lich imprisoned in a magically warded mausoleum being held by the magic user who sacrificed their life to hold the spell, and they encounter it as a skeleton in spotless, gorgeous robes with no head. Of course, they search the ossuary of 10,000 skulls until they find the one with the silver linings in the eye, and not once ever have they tried to speak with dead or nothing. They immediately go on, they stick it on top of the skeleton, that breaks the spell, out comes the lich, and hasted, writing a nightmare and pissed off. 3 letters, TPK. Um, it's my observation that most players today, unless they've been playing old school for a long time, absolutely disregard the value of obtaining information. A good group picks the DM's brain with questions, and he'll let you know when you're getting nitpicky and it's been enough, but you can never get enough information. I make the group map, at least a follow map. Don't have to put in every detail, but you go 30 feet and then you turn right, and then, a follow map. Doesn't have to have the walls and the doors in perfectly. Just got to be something you can read, so if you got to beat feet in a hurry, you know which way to go. Clerics have, and in my world, clerics don't say spells. In my world, my universe, multiverse, whatever, clerics say prayers, and they can say so many prayers of certain potency over a certain time period. And the when a cleric has achieved enough experience points to ascend to the next level, in my world, they already know all those prayers. That's part and parcel of becoming the next level, is while you're hustling along, getting by, you're also doing some study, so when you get there, you got it. Now, it doesn't mean you have, but they have it. Not like a magic user that has to acquire it, either in a grimoire or on a scroll or whatever. Clerics know the prayers because they have the little catechism for their faith. That's the way it works on mine. Now, the character, the player character that I would like to see played more is probably one of the hardest there is to play in the old first edition, and that's the original bard. You got to go through being a fighter, you got to go through being a thief, I believe, and then only then do you become a druid and study to become a bard. Once you do, that is an incredibly capable rough and tumble player character class. Do a little of this, do a little of that, do some of that. And you have all these different things you can go. And if you can get to like a 5-5-5, my God, I'd rather have 3 5-5-5s in my party than 5 level 8s. Just because of the versatility it offers. Okay, now here's this one gives me a preparatory caveat. The actions herein discussed require very good rules. All right, that said, according to some historical records, archers, under certain circumstances, would try to catch arrows shot at them to keep up their inventory and avoid a fatal blow. If a DM granted this skill, therefore exposing this possibility to party member and foes, would you consider it fair to apply this skill as broadly as possible? That is, let the monsters try to catch arrows, fighters try, clerics try, etc. Or would you say that only someone more intimately involved in projectile warfare? That sounds like a good idea, because I think everybody decided they're going to catch arrows is a dumb idea, because if you fail, you're going to lose one or more of the following: finger, fingertip, multiple fingers, pierce through the palm, thumb, pierce through the wrist. If you play with where did I get hit, how did I get hit, that's a really bad idea. Now, if you abstract hit points, which I mostly do, not so big a deal. Depends on how you run combat. Sure, anything's possible in old school. Player would ask us, player would ask us, hey, I want to try. Okay, and we decide which of the 6 attributes had the most influence on that, and have them roll a die. Okay, let's see. We're almost through. Okay. Why, golly, that looks like everything. I think I made it through. And I guess I did. These are always so hard the second time around, because I already figured I did talk about everything else. Okay, what's coming up? I'm hoping to be at Gamehole Con in October. I will be doing virtual games for North Texas RPG Convention in the first week of June. I'll be running 3 or 4 games for them online. Until then, that's all I've got. Hopefully we're getting back to normal. Hopefully we can start getting our old groups back together, meeting a couple times a month. Doesn't mean we can, drop all our guard yet. It's still a good idea to wear a mask. I'm fully vaxxed and I still wear one, just so I don't expose anybody else. And, observe the protocols, the distancing, the sneezing in the elbows, and the washing the hands. It's getting better, but we're not out of the woods yet. Not when such a huge proportion of the population is vaccine reluctant or opposed. So take care of yourself. Get out, enjoy some weather. And until next time, Dodada Gobi.
Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when the race went down. Called it Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. TSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.